session 2. We started with the topic Exploring Integral Education, a synthesis of the past, present, and future. What we will do today is we will have a brief recap of what we covered in the last session, in case there are a few people, and even the people who have attended the earlier session also, for them it will help them with the recollection of the points covered. So after the brief recap, we will take up a couple of important questions posted by 2-3 of the last time attendees. They are very important, and therefore we will take it up, and then we will enter into today's. In a certain sense, the questions were asked in such a way that they naturally will lead us into what I wanted to cover today. So there is going to be a continuity in that sense as well. So here is a quick recap of what we covered in our last session. In the last session, we started the interaction by taking a look at the past. And we have two pasts. This is how I would like to put. There is a distant past and there is a recent past. In the distant past, we saw, according to the historians, whether they belong to East or the West, they are of a single opinion that the India was prolific in its creativity, and it kept on creating in almost every conceivable field. And we saw this one quotation from Sri Aurobindo on the stupendous creativity of India. I'm just going to bring it up on the screen so that we can just take a look at it before we pass it on. Hardik, can I share? Yes.
Yeah. You're the presenter, so you can share anything.
In that quotation, Sri Aurobindo said, he gave a list of things where what we have created is even now available for any of us to go through. And this is proof enough that there was a time period where there was an education which enabled India to be of this caliber, and their lifestyle is of such a high quality. And the question naturally comes to our mind that what is that type of education which enabled them to be so creative, so abundant, and to put in a single sentence, the capacity of India of the distant past is that without the help of a microscope, they could enter into the atom and understand the composition of an atom. And without the help of a telescope, they can reach out to the planetary systems and they can map out the planetary system. And what did they do after that? After entering into the atom and after taking a look at the planetary system, they were able to say that the micro and the macrocosm are very, very similar. How did they arrive at this stupendous discovery without a microscope or without a telescope? And this capacity, which must have been part of the education in those era, is somehow lost to us. How did we lose it? That is where we came to the recent past of about 300 to 400 years, when a group of business-minded people calling themselves as East India Company came from the British part of the world, and they came simply because they were overawed by the opulence, the richness of the country. And when they came here, they said, this is an excellent area where we can do plenty of business and we can earn so much money that England will become a very prosperous country. Now, that was the idea with which this East India Company came around the 16th and 17th century, around about that. And when they came, what they found was it's extremely difficult to manipulate these people, because the moment they want to manipulate these people, dominate these people, the resistance which was coming out innately from the people of Bharat was such that they wanted to figure out a way in which they can make this race into a dominated race. And for that, they got together, some of the best brains of Britain came together, and we saw next to that, the minutes of the person who was interested to come up with how do we make India docile, people of a dominated country, so that they can make their business into something which is very profitable. That was when we saw that beautifully hitting sentence from Thomas Macaulay, one of the persons interested with coming up with an educational policy for the entire India, that their agenda was to create an intermediate race. I'm going to share with you quickly because it's important to know how did we and when did we lose our capacity to be so creative, which was there in the distant past, and how did we lose that. I will share with you briefly this part. So this is where the Macaulay proposed that we cannot directly rule over this country. We need a race of intermediaries who, and this is what he says, who talk like, yes, screen has come up. So this is what he has said. I feel that it is impossible for us, the portion which I have highlighted, that's what I'm reading. I feel that it is impossible for us with our limited means to attempt to educate the body of the people. We must at present do our best to form a class who may be interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern. So there are the governing set and there is the governed set, the people of Bharat. And the people who wanted to govern were not able to effectively do it, and therefore they wanted to create an intermediary race. What will this race do? Well, this race will do precisely this: a class of persons Indian in blood and color, but English in tastes, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. Why so many things? So that nothing which is original and authentic in India influences the mindset of the people, and they start rebelling against the governors of us. And therefore, he said, he continues, to that class we may leave it to refine the vernacular. So if we give these people only something which belongs to England, the West, and if we give them the taste which is not Indian in its origin, opinions, meaning ideas, also not Indian in origin, morals, and even the thoughts are not anything from India, but that which has come from the West, especially from the colonizers. If so, then it becomes easy because this set of people will be a set of people who is so brainwashed that they will not question the governors, the colonizers, and they will be implementing their agenda without question on the people who are governed. Now, this was the difficult situation that we put ourselves into, and unfortunately, this intermediaries became so proficient that what we have now available in the name of education is by and large what these people, the intermediaries, brought into implementation by the dictate of the colonizers. So if you look at the educational system which is currently going on, now we have come to the from the distant past to the immediate past into the present. And then we look at the subjects which are offered in any of the schools in India. Then we found that there is nothing or hardly anything which has come originally and natively from India in this particular sense, that what made India great in the past somehow seems to be left out. And instead, we have a few subjects which were adopted in order to create a race of people who will work in the industry in order to work for the British and earn money for them. That type of an education which was brought into Act is still by and large maintained. Even after achieving independence in 1947, we became a free country, but we have not decided to reacquire the education which made us great. And then we saw a little bit of the modern efforts, not only in the educational scenario in India, but all over the world, where people were trying to bring in extra dimensions of life, which was found lacking, especially in the education in the West. So we saw that in the 95, um, somebody with the name Daniel Goleman brought in a theory which said that it is not that we have to learn only physics, chemistry, biology, which are the materialistic sciences, the sciences which focus on the physical reality, but there is another dimension, which is the dimensions of emotion, and we have to make that too part of our education. He called it as the emotional intelligence. And interestingly, when we look at another attempt, which is also happening simultaneously in the recent times, in the name of alternative education, they already have been trying to bring in these extra dimensions of life. One thing is to look at the physicality and say that everything is a result of this physicality. It's another thing to look at ourselves and understand that what we are in this life is a result of two more dimensions. If we look at our own individual life, we saw in the last session that what happens to us, the life that gets defined by us, is in a certain sense a result of what we think and what we feel. So, what I think and what I feel, the emotions that I carry and the thoughts that I carry today become my life, tomorrow they become my action. These are the two things which drive my action. Why do I do what I do? Because, well, I got a thought that this is what I should do, or I feel that this is what I should do, and then it becomes an act. So, if whatever I do is a result of happenings in the two dimensions, in the dimension of thought, in the dimension of emotion, should that not be part of an education where we learn to control these two dimensions so that we are not at the mercy of our emotions and thoughts, but thoughts and emotions are under our control, and they are under our control in such a way that we can make the best use of them, and thereby we can end up having a beautiful life on our side. So these two extra dimensions became the focal point of alternative education. And in that, we took up one alternative education in particular, which was given the name integral education. Hindi equivalent is Purna Shiksha, by the mother of Sri Aurobindo Ashram in somewhere in long time back, somewhere in the 1940s. She started this experiment of having an education which explored these two extra dimensions. And then in our last session, we also saw that it is not enough to look at our physicality and our emotions and thoughts alone, because they don't give us a sense of direction and purpose to our life. Because if we think that all that we have is body, everybody will try to pamper the body through whatever means. Or if we think that only the emotions are more important to us and nothing else, well, there will be an emotional fight which will happen, because by its nature, emotions want to influence and dominate and express and bring everybody under its influence, and we will end up in a chaotic situation. And just imagine what will happen if we allow the thoughts to rule our life, individual or collective. And then we saw how there is a deeper dimension, a deeper intelligence, a deeper wisdom, which is within every one of us. And we also saw how beautifully it regulates our life from the beginning. And if we allow our life to be guided, supported, and governed by that fourth dimension, why do we call it fourth? We already know we have three dimensions: the physical dimension in which our body and the world exist. There is an emotional dimension where a lot of emotions happen. It's a world by itself. And then a third dimension, a dimension in which our thoughts happen, and they are a dimension, a world by themselves. So it is not sufficient that we have three dimensions, because left to themselves, they are like things that pull us apart, each one in each direction. I will give you an example. When I was a child studying 10th standard, every time I used to have exams, in those days, our parents were very strict. and beating and whatever else is the means of punishment are all freely allowed and practiced quite extensively by these parents. And they have put the condition that we have to excel through all the exams and we have to be the top. So all the parents were driving all the children to be top of the class, and that was our condition there. But every time the exams comes, somehow that is the time where we will have some beautiful programs. I have to tell you, my education, 10th, when I was doing 10th, it happened when the television was finding its entry to almost all the houses in India, wherever, whichever middle class can afford it. And the programs that is broadcast were so tempting that somehow I was very avid fan of Indian cricket. So somehow during the exam time, either India travels abroad or some other countries cricket team travels to India and they start telecasting the whole match live. And sometimes they are so interesting. And what to do? It coincides with my exam time. And when I sit together to study, I found three things pulling me in three directions. What is the three things? One, my mind says, which is the mental dimension, you have to get marks, otherwise your future life is ruined, destroyed. You will not get a good college, you will not get a good degree, your life is done, finished with. Well, that's what my parents have told me. But what do my emotions say? My emotions completely and totally ignored what my mind was saying. It said, just look at these cricket matches going on. How interesting. If you miss it, it's gone. Because when you see a cricket match live and when you see it later as a recorded match, the difference is so vast, so huge. You won't get the satisfaction at all. So the heart, the emotions were feeling for the cricket match that I have to somehow view the match, and I will be calculating everything. Whenever I will watch the match, whenever I will study for, and obviously, of course, it's very difficult to follow all the plans when emotions become the charge of our life. And then while I was trying to figure out should I listen to my mind that I have to study or should I listen to my emotions which really wanted. Thank you, Madhuri, for muting because we are talking about something which happened and which must have happened in everybody's life under various circumstances. How inside us, two things are fighting most of the time. Mind says one thing, emotion says other thing. And the third one is the physical reality, physical dimension. What to do when I'm in the middle of exam and already kept awake 4 nights, almost full nights, and prepared for the exam. My body is screaming for some attention. It just wants to eat and go to sleep. So it says, you don't worry about your future. Don't worry about cricket match. Just eat something nice and switch on the fan and go for a full sleep. And then it also gives justification. If you sleep nicely, maybe whatever you have mugged up will stay in your mind. You might pass. And this is the justification which is coming from the third dimension. But these three dimensions, if we allow them to rule our life will be a battlefield. Kurukshetra happened thousands of years back, but I tell you, if we allow these three dimensions to rule our life, it can happen every moment of our life. And therefore, we needed the help of a deeper wisdom, some part of us which is so wise that it can actually understand the nature of these three parts and bring them together and harmonize in such a beautiful way that the moment I want to do something, my mind jumps up and says, hey, Baba, here are 10 ways in which you can do it and excel. And my emotions completely support me because it finds an interest in what I want to do. And all my physical energies are so much in harmony that the body jumps up and says that you just tell me what has to be done and I'm ready to do it. And if this has to happen, we needed the help of a fourth part in us, a fourth dimension, which should have a few qualities. Otherwise, we will be bringing in a fourth fighter into the already house filled area. And therefore, this fourth one has to be some part which has a tremendous amount of wisdom. But who listens to only wisdom? You think my mind and heart will listen to my wisdom unless it comes from somebody who has the power and the strength? Looking at it, my mind will say, oh my God, I better listen to this fellow. He may be speaking wise words, but if I don't listen to him, look at that power and strength he has. So, this part in us should not only have wisdom, but it should also have the power and strength. But power and strength, how long can you listen to in obedience to power and strength unless and until there is an element of unconditional love? Just imagine if somebody loves me unconditionally, I will find it difficult to say no to that person because of that tremendous amount of love. So, if that part in me not only has wisdom, not only has power, but what if it has an unconditional love for what I call as myself, then definitely my mind will feel like listening, my heart will feel, it will melt into doing whatever this part wants to, and my body also will feel like following this part, which has infinite love, unconditional love for me. And if, remember, it's a big if there is a fourth part in us, which not only has wisdom but power and an unconditional love. And if there is a part in us, I would say that in the name of education, we must introduce this part to the children, every one of them, because finally, as and when needed, these children are going to draw out wisdom and power and love from that source. And just imagine what will be the life of such children who have learned to draw things out of this fourth dimension. And interestingly, why am I stressing so much on the fourth dimension? Can't we have, for example, wisdom from outside? There are so many wise people who have put their wisdom into nice books and they are available. You just have to go into the internet, order. If you have a few hundred rupees, then you can get wisdom from outside. You can get even power and strength from outside. Employ, there are some politicians who have some commandos all the time surrounding them to ensure that they are nicely safeguarded. We can hire the strength from outside. I remember one of the last times participants was talking about this hiring culture. That's what this person. So we can get wisdom, we can purchase wisdom, we can hire strength, and we can hire love too. There is one time I came across an advertisement. It was somewhere in Japan that they said that there are a group of people available with them. We just have to hire them. They will come and be our lovers for one day, and they will be doing everything that will please us, and therefore love on hire. For this one day, they will listen to, they will make us happy. They would have already studied your natural tendencies and they will try to fulfill that. And for one day, well, you have to pay a lot of money for that. Love on hire. Now, if so many things can be procured from outside, why don't we go for it? Because all that you need for that is money, 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 money. And how do you get money? Well, the modern education focuses on that primarily. How? Get a degree and then get into a nice corporate on salary in 5 digits. With that 5 digits, you get not only plenty of wisdom and plenty of strength, protection, plenty of love. Why should we insist on having these things from within? Fortunately, I don't have to share with you too much because the current situation, the lockdowns which are going on in the name of COVID-19 precautions itself will tell. I have come across several people, some really rich people. It was at the beginning of the lockdown session.
1 minute, Shivda. I think your voice is gone. Just give me a second. Sorry for this. Somebody just joined, so the presentation role shifted automatically. Yeah, you're back on.
All right. So, well, back, I was talking about my conversation with one of the wealthy people, and they seem to be having that one thing through which a lot of other things can be procured. Now, that's a nice slogan, huh? Get that one thing through which everything else can be procured, and that one thing was money. So I asked them, so how is it going on in your end? Lockdowns have just started, and this person sounded so miserable. He said, why, what happened? Well, the first thing, my maids have stopped coming. My entire kitchen and functioning of the kitchen and even the cooking was being done by two maids, not one, because this person was very rich. And in that person kitchen, variety of dishes were cooked almost every day. And suddenly the lockdown starts. He's not able to. Not that he didn't have money to get people, he had the money. But remember, if the person who comes carries this corona virus, they put extra fear into us. The person who is carrying corona may or may not show symptoms. So even when you look at a healthy, smiling person, you are already suspecting that person. Will he be carrying corona because he is called asymptomatic? He may not show symptoms, but he may be carrying. So this wealthy person cannot even call his maid, even if he could get a maid. It's a dangerous, risky proposition. What happened? Well, he was trying to cook whatever was available, and it was a miserable attempt. He ended up poisoning his stomach, and you know, when stomach gets poisoned, our entire system stops functioning at its peak efficiency. So he said, I am going through a trauma. And he said, this is one time where even the money doesn't come to our mind. There will always be situation when things that come from outside, procured from outside, can be taken away, whatever it may be. Just look at all the facilities that you have. The money that you have, I see again, once again, remember when demonetization was going on, suddenly people found that their money is disappearing, not able to retain money, but any money, cash that we have, one calamity and it can disappear. Our houses, during the times of calamity, thousands of people lose even their posh bungalow. We cannot say that my bungalow is built by spending crores of rupees and therefore it will stay, it will withstand a calamity. No. When an earthquake, when a flood happens, and if your building is somewhere in that area, it will be lost. Whether it is a bungalow, whether it is a car, whether it is even a mobile phone. I've seen so many people losing their mobile phones, which gives us a clue that things that are procured from outside, any moment we might lose them. Okay, understood. This is easy gyan. Even, I will take it to one more step, even the people around us, there is no guarantee that they will be available with us, they will be with us, and as long as we live. Any moment, even the people can just disappear from our life. There is no guarantee for anything in life if it comes from outside. If it is something that is there procured from outside, or if it is something from outside. On the contrary, anything that we gain from within, for example, we develop a deep insight of looking at things with plenty of wisdom that is coming from inside. Where does it come from? It comes from the fourth part. If we get in touch with that part, if we get connected with it, as long as the connection is secure, this is one connection. Once we gain it, once we have it, nothing in the world can take away this connection from me. Now, that is the most beautiful thing about things that are on the inside. See, if I am keeping a packet of currency in my pocket, anybody who is a little more strong than me can hold me, forcibly take that money from me, and anything else, even my mobile phone, anything that is outside of me can be taken away forcibly. But can that person forcibly take the intelligence that is coming from inside? How can he reach out to my inside? And once I have access to this intelligence, how can anybody in this world prevent me from connecting with what is inside? Impossible. And therefore, if we make the connection permanent in such a way that we have access to a great amount of wisdom, nothing in the outside world can actually take away that wisdom from me. Or if that part in us has a tremendous amount of inner strength, anything that happens on the outside will not be able to take this strength away from me, because they don't have access to the inside of me. They can take away anything outside. They can take away my bungalow, my car, my mobile phone, the people who are with me, but they can't take away what I have developed on the inside. And also, the quality, the deeper things which I develop inside me cannot be taken by anything on the outside unless I myself disconnect myself from that fourth part. But why would I do that? You remember the earlier slogan? Get hold of that one thing through which you can procure everything. Well, if I find that one thing through which I can have access to permanent wisdom, I can have access to permanent inner strength, if I can have access to permanent love, why would I let it go? And therefore, the importance of discovering this fourth dimension, the fourth part in us. That is how important this discovery. And in the past, in India's ancient history, somehow the educationists have figured out a way of getting connected to this fourth dimension and bringing things out. Now, we have briefly covered the content of our previous session, but then a couple of questions arise, very valid question. All this sounds good, it makes me feel good, but how do we make it into a reality is the question that we grapple with. But we also took a look at the present day subjects that are being taught in the school, because there is one attempt which is happening all over India, and I have to caution all of us against that tendency, which is most of the schools already have the syllabuses which came from the era of colonization. They are still, by and large, they have added a little more in each of the subject, but the subject, the mainstream subject, the main subjects are by and large from the colonizers, what has come from the colonizers: physics, chemistry, biology, social studies, mathematics, everything. A little more got added, but there is an attempt all over the country and even all over the world to make it more interesting to children. So one thing is to question what we teach. Is it relevant for children? If it is relevant, we must try our best to find ways of teaching it more and better and better. But if we don't take up the question that what we teach in the name of current syllabus, is it relevant? Without asking that question, just imagine if you take up mathematics and all that you and I have covered over 12 years from class 1 to class 12, you find some very nice, innovative way of teaching it. You have audio visuals and you have some props and you have this and that, and in and through it, you are trying to make it the same old irrelevant information more interesting. That is why we did the exercise. I asked you a specific question. In that entire mainstream subjects that was covered, if you call it as 100% out of which, how much percentage would you have actually utilized in your life? Not talking about classroom, because a mathematics teacher would have used probably 70-80% of the mathematics in her classroom, but in her life, how much would she have used? And when I asked the question, I almost consistently got the answer to be around 10%, except for one or two exceptional people. I don't yet know their background, but almost everybody, 99.9% of the people who were there in the last session said 10% of what we covered in the syllabus during those class 1 to class 12, the most important period in my life where I had the maximum capacity to learn because I was a fresh slate and I had the maximum capacity to learn. And that period, what was given to me in the name of education, only 10% of it actually has got relevance. Why are we teaching it? Well, there is some kind of an explanation too. That by teaching 90%, which are irrelevant, we agree, we accept that. But through that, forcing children to learn that, are we not helping them to improve their memory? Because what happens in the examination, you have to answer the question and therefore you're forced to memorize, and somehow one faculty in us which gets constant training, even though it is very forced, is our faculty of memory. But because it is forcefully developed, somehow I develop enough memory to hold things for a very short period. And once the exam is over, boom, suddenly everything gets cleared. I feel an immense relief, and the faculty of memory stops functioning anymore. You ask anybody who has children, any of these children who have written an exam, after their exam, they say, don't ask me anything because I have already forgotten. Why? Because only that faculty, if you force it, well, it will rebel, as simple as that. But the more important thing is, why are we teaching 90% which are irrelevant only with the excuse of we are helping the child to improve their memory by forcing something which is relevant? Yes, by asking them to focus on mathematics and physics and chemistry by integration, calculation, this. Only one will use it in his life, but for everybody else, well, we are forcing them to concentrate. Why? So that their concentration powers develop. Now, if this is the excuse, just imagine, in order to forcibly improve the child's memory and concentration power, why should we make use of the 90% of it as an irrelevant material? Why can't we develop these two things by making use of something which is also relevant for the child? And then suddenly we wake up and then we have a question to ask. If we can make 100% of the content relevant to the child, just imagine the life of a child. And instead, if we decide to stick to the current syllabus, make it more interesting, and by audiovisuals and innovative, they call it something as innovative technology, innovative pedagogy, innovative whatever. You are finding innovative ways of forcing irrelevant content down the throat of children. So how does it work? You understand the mistake that we are making. I'm not against those innovative methods. They are so beautiful. But what about the content? How relevant is it for a child? And last session, we took a survey. It's an important question. If you can write down, if they have a paper and pencil, and if you are especially from the teaching community, when I say teaching community, remember, I include the people at home, the parents, as well as those who are in the school, because for me, both belong to this teaching community. Only these places are different, but both are equally teachers to a child. So this is one question which I would like all of you, even just to write it down. Why do I teach what I teach my children? Just a simple question. And then comes how. You see, why do I teach what I teach? What I teach, 90% is relevant. So why do I teach it? Let us work at the root level, and then let us ask the question, how do I teach? How do I make it more interesting? Because I have a content which is 100% relevant to child. Now I can ask the question, how do I teach it interesting way? So let us not be caught. Let us not be trapped in that idea that I'm teaching our school and we are teaching the syllabus in very lot of activities and innovative techniques, because that is only a second question. The first question is, how relevant is what we teach? Why do I teach what I teach? If what I teach is should be relevant to children, then we have to think of a syllabus which is child centered. And when I say child centered, remember what we discussed last time. We're not going to ask a 3, 4, 5-year-old child, beta, our education is child centered. So, what would you like to learn today? Well, he will say, I want to go and learn. He will never by himself will he turn to us, because he is just a bud about to bloom. He's not somebody who already has figured out his life, and therefore, how will he be able to tell us, the people who belong to the teaching community, what he wants to learn? Beta, what will you eat? Will you eat upma or some other chips? Obviously, he will go by what he has seen on the TV or what has actually been tempting in his life, and that is what he's likely to choose. He will fall for the temptations, and he has not yet developed the capacity to resist the temptation. And in that stage, it will be dangerous to bring in a child centered education where we ask the child, what does he want to learn? So, if that is not the case, what are we supposed to do as teachers and as parents? Well, asking is not the only way. We will have to sense. And if we have to sense, we have to understand the anatomy, the psychology of the person whom we are trying to sense. And we have come up to this part, that how we are supposed to sense and see if there are some common elements besides the unique elements in a child which we can facilitate. And we also took up last time, there's no point in telling every child is unique and no two children are carbon copies of each other. Therefore, we can never have an education where anything can be taught in a common way to a collectivity. And this is one of the objections to this new age education, which is child centered. Because every child is unique, how will the child centered education look? If there are 30 children, 20 children in my classroom, I should have 20 syllabuses simultaneously going on because each child is unique. And this is where we need to answer, because this is an important question and it's an important objection. If a facilitator or a teacher comes and asks, practically it is not possible to have 20, 30 syllabuses going for each of my children, and therefore, is there something common? Something which is followed by the psychology of the children. And this is where we in fact almost mapped out the growth of a child. And most interestingly, we saw that the sequence of growth is common for all children, based on our experience or based on any philosophy or anybody's theory. If you look at it, you will find that the sequence of growth that happens in children is common. The particulars of sequence may be different. Now, this is an important. We will take this up and look at it before we go into some of the questions, a couple of questions which was raised in our previous session. So when you look at a child, and if you want to have a child-centered education, what do we mean by child-centered education? An education which facilitates optimum growth of the child. Simple, isn't it? When we say child-centered education, it's an education that facilitates optimum growth of the whole of the child. Let me put it that way. And this is what we want to achieve. If so, if we look at a child, I'm sure all the parents will resonate with me, or anybody who has had a child born to, they will agree with me that the first period of the child is spent in the child mastering things or becoming familiar with things that are proper to his physical part, the first dimension. So when a child is born, see how the child's senses begin to open, the child's eye begins to open, its hearing begins to function, it begins to taste, and it begins to smell, it starts recognizing at least his or her own parents by touch. So immediately the parts in the body, like the five senses, open up. And after that, what happens? Well, the body has to be controlled by the child. So the next few months is spent in the child trying to figure out, how do I make use of this body? First, it will flip over, and that's a major moment in a mother. I've seen in my home when a child is born and when it flips over, whoever sees that gives a shout, and everybody comes rushing. Oh, he has flipped over, because that's the beginning of the child gaining control, getting familiar with, how do I figure out this body? And once the child flips over, then muscles are so loose, they are not yet developed, and the child, something in the child engages in movements which will gradually strengthen the muscles, the tissues, and the nerves. So the child will try to crawl, and then try to stand up, and it will fall down, stand up, fall down. It's not that it is failing to stand up, but it is developing the strength of the muscles until one day suddenly it stands up on its legs, and then it starts climbing, it's walking, running. It also will be figuring out the food. Quite early in life, you will notice that children will reject some type of food. We don't know why. It's interesting. And they will accept some type of food. You try to force it into the mouth of a child, it will come back with the same force or with the redoubled force. And the food habits are getting formed by something inside. What is necessary for the body will be accepted. What is necessary, well, it will be sent out. As simple as that. And next is the sleeping habit. Oh my God. If we can get the child to develop a sleeping habit where the sleeping coincides with your sleeping time, which is usually, I'm assuming it's night, and his waking up time, it coincides during the daytime, that is a tremendous habit to be inculcated, because the child, listen to me carefully, the child would have made his body follow the rhythms of nature. Now, if you have an opposite question, that why should children go to sleep at night if they feel like being awake, then let's promote that, because we want a child-centered education. Now, be careful about what we are talking about. Just imagine that when all the life on this planet is sustained by sun, the rays of the sun. You look at all the flowers and plants and the trees that are there during the daytime, they are sustained by the sunlight. And the birds, and which are dependent on fruits and other things available, for them also, when the sunlight is there, they are maximum active. And the animals, both vegetarian and non-vegetarian, well, if it's vegetarian, they are dependent on things coming from trees. If they are non-vegetarian, they are dependent on birds and other smaller animals, which again depend on the daytime active state of the entire nature. What happens in the evening? Well, the sun sets. The source of sustenance, that which sustained the life and action of the entire planet, when it suddenly disappears, the entire nature as a collective entity feels the absence of their life given, and gradually, as the night sets in, a kind of dullness sets in because the life giver, the energy giver is not anymore. And as we approach the midnight, and little immediately after the midnight, it becomes a kind of a lazy, tamasic state for nature, that the nature wants to wake up and then feel the life again. And when it starts doing that, that is the moment we call as the dawn. What happens in the dawn? When the entire nature wants to be alive again and it wants to feel the energy, not the energy of the night, which is tamasic, which is full of inertia, but the energy of the day, which is the exuberance of life activities. When it has this aspiration, at some point the answer comes. The sun says, I am ready to come once again. And the announcement of the sun that I am ready to come is the dawn. When the first ray of light breaks out, and the entire nature, which has been missing this lively energy, the moment it gets the first response from the sun, there is a kind of symphony which explodes into nature, a kind of energy, a kind of exuberance, a kind of joy and happiness which explodes into the presence of the nature, that if we wake up at that moment, we can synchronize our energies, our not only our physical energies, but our emotional and mind energies, so that we can be truly alive if we can synchronize going to bed, going to sleep at night, and waking up at the moment of dawn. Just imagine if we can help the child to acquire this habit, and when the child is accustomed to get up at the stroke of the dawn, imagine how beautifully his energies will be flowing. The entire day will be worth spending the time with the child because his energies are flowing. An important habit of sleep. When should it get formed? We can't allow the child to say that, when you grow up, you will decide for yourself when to sleep, when to be awake. No, this is an important habit which has to be inculcated. It's a habit of the body. The body has to learn to go to sleep and the other energies too. And that has to be done in the initial stage. We call that stage as a stage of physical education, where the child learns to control his body, the senses have opened up, the muscles are being strengthened. The child is gaining little more control over the food habits, the sleep habits, and by gaining control over the body, the action of the body also comes gradually under a child's control. When is this supposed to happen? Not after the child has grown up. This has to happen right in the beginning stage. It has to be started. It cannot be finished in the initial years of child itself. We cannot say that this physical education, once it has started, well, by 5-6 years of the child, we should finish and we should start the next sequence of growth. No. What we start can be improved and developed all through life, but there is a stage in which we can start. And starting the things that belonging to the physical body, its habits, its sleeping, food habits, and gaining control over the body, getting into a very active, dynamic lifestyle, not a lifestyle which promotes switching on the AC and then going to sleep after having a full stomach. Not that lifestyle, but an exuberant lifestyle. The foundation has to be laid in the initial stages of the child. We call this as the physical. Is it common to all children, or each child is unique? Do you think that some child will take this aspect, let us say, after 10 years, the child wants to learn to control its body? A 10-year-old child will learn how to flip over? No. This is the beauty of it. There is something which is inbuilt and inborn. If we allow it to be active, that inbuilt, inborn urge will decide how to make the physical part most active and exuberant, the foundation. There's a beautiful Sanskrit proverb, Shariram Adyam Khalu Dharma Sadhanam. The body indeed is the first instrument of right life. Well, body can be an instrument of any type of life, but the physical education at that age is one of the most important thing. And if we take care of it, the child has a beautiful foundation on which the child just have to build on its life, because the physical foundation has been laid. The child can improve it further through sports, through any of the sciences which help the child to gain more control over the body. For example, yoga asanas, all that can happen later, but this foundation is laid, then we are starting the education of the child on surer foundation. This responsibility belongs more to the parents than to the teachers. And that's why I said the education starts at home. We cannot say that the place where education happens is the school, and once I put my child in the school, education starts. No, it starts from the moment the child was born. And if you have to listen to the mother, this education will have to start even before the child is born. Even as the child, from the moment the child is conceived and produced in the womb, the education actually should continue. But that is for a different topic altogether. We'll come back to this topic. Is it common for all children to naturally, spontaneously focus on the physical education? Yes. That makes this new type of education so easy. Earlier, we thought if it has to be child centered, if each child is unique, then we will end up, if we have 30 children, will we end up with 30 different syllabuses? Well, you got the answers now. Now, in this physical education, the details will vary, but the generality, the commonality is the same. Now, this is the type of education that we are talking about. And we have also seen, if you consider a child, I'm going to tell you a crude analogy. Please do not take it literally, but take it with a little bit of humor too. If you look at the child as a kind of a tiffin box, please do not look at the child as a tiffin box. I'm just giving an analogy. As a tiffin box having three layers, which layer will you open if you receive a tiffin box filled with lots of nice juicy items? Inside the tiffin carrier, a lot of nice and tasty things are there. If you want to access, if you want to help those things to come out, which one will you access? Well, first is the topmost box, and this is the physical box. And once you have opened it and then started taking care of the contents of that physical box, there is a next box which opens. And this is the box of emotions, the second dimension, because the child, as it grows up, the initial emotional expressions will be very crude. It will be very difficult to train the child in gaining control over emotions. If you have been with children, you would know no amount of logic, no amount of reasoning is going to work on the child, a child who is having emotional exuberance and outburst. It's extremely difficult. Why is that? Why don't the children who are 3, 4, 5 years old listen to us and don't throw tantrums? And they are not, when they cry, they cry as if the whole entire household is on fire. And when they throw tantrum, you can't do anything else except for attending to that tantrum. Why is that? Why doesn't we, if we tell that there is nothing good is going to come out of this tantrum, why don't they listen? Well, they cannot grasp things through their intellect, their mind, the logic, the reasoning. And this is the result of this. If you do this, it doesn't help anybody, it doesn't help you. It's not easy for a child to understand. Why? There is a third box, which is our mental box, our intellect, through which we do the logical reasoning analysis and we arrive at a conclusion. What is good, what is bad is not yet opened in the child properly. So all that a child has, physical energy is trying to master, emotional energies, it has no idea what is to be done with it. One moment it's happy, the other moment it feels jealous, the other moment it starts insisting, I want this, I want that. And in that spectacle, we have to understand that the most initial stages of a child, the child is not yet ready for emotional education. The child has to reach at least 5, 6, 7 years. But for a child of 2 year, 3 year old, do you mean to say that we should have to ignore the emotions of a child? No. We cannot train the child. No. Take control of your anger. Why are you angry? Start counting from 10 to now 1 backwards. The child is not going to follow. If that is so, are we supposed to ignore the emotions? No. We can't help the child to gain control, but we can work on the environment. We can work on ourselves so that we can provide the child with an emotionally stable environment. And that indirectly will be a help until the child becomes 5, 6 years, when the second tiffin box, the tiffin box of emotions, nicely gets opened. That is the time that inborn intelligence in the child has decided. It's almost telling that, hey, my second box is open. I'm ready to take an additional education, which is of the nature of emotions. How do we know that? Interesting. Yes, I'm going to share with you something which is so deep and profound, specific to integral education, that you can figure out when to start what. When our body is hungry, our body gives us the indication. It starts asking for food, and you give food. Well, you might be giving 3 times in a day food to the body. The food that you give is nutritious according to the requirement. That is a good food. You will end up by having beautiful health. But suppose if you ignore the hunger which is naturally coming to you and start stuffing the body with nice parathas and then the puran poli, that sweet dish in Maharashtra which is dipped in ghee. So if you indiscriminately feed your body with that, or pizzas, if you do it indiscriminately, if you stuff it, after some time the body will fall ill. As simple as that. So if the body, which is fed with the food that it needs, it's not common for everybody. And also a body which is nicely active. Food is not the only one which the body needs. All parents, please remember, because I have gone through that experience where my parents have been stuffing things into me. Thoda aur khao, eat more, more. But it's equally important. One, it has to be the food that my body needs, but my body also needs to be active to digest that food. So all the activities and sports and games and the action part also has to be insisted on by parents so that my physical part grows in a healthy way. In the same way, our emotional part, if you think that if our emotional part doesn't get hungry and it doesn't have to be given food, we are totally wrong. Our body needs food, gets hungry 3 times in a day at least. Do you think our emotional part doesn't need any food? Yes. So what type of samosas and parathas do we have to feed our emotional part? Well, it is not the physical food that is food for the emotional part. It is beautiful, positive emotions that become food for the emotional part of the child. What does it mean? We will have to surround the child with plenty of love, care, concern, compassion, all the beautiful positive feelings. If we surround the child, that becomes food for the child. The child absorbs it directly, and its emotional part grows. When it becomes teenager, it will have such a robust emotions that all that teenage tantrums that you come across, well, it will not be there if the child has a healthy emotional part where emotional food is properly given. A child which grows up in an environment where parents or teachers and management or everybody else is fighting, what happens to the child? The child absorbs the emotional part of the child, absorbs that bad food, the vibration created by a fight or a quarrel, or two people, saying nasty things, doing nasty things to each other. It's such a food that the emotional part cannot digest it. If it takes it, it becomes ill. And when the child reaches the teen age, you will know that if a teenager having the emotional body nicely grown, he is ready to love everybody, he is ready to show care and concern and understanding emotionally of everybody. That happens to a teenager whose emotional environment is taken care of by the parents or the teachers. So this is the second different box, and this is the different box where a lot of what makes our life rich and beautiful also has to happen, because once the emotional box opens up, some of the finer beautiful emotions, the emotions of gratitude, the emotions of courage, the emotions of honesty, sincerity, the emotions of love, all this has the possibility of getting developed at the foundational stage during this second stage in the sequence. Mother calls it as the vital education. By the word vital, it means that vital energy which expresses in the form of feelings and emotions. And what is the best way of helping the child to develop it? Stories are an excellent means. Whatever the child's emotional body hungers for, just as our body sometimes asks for samosa, it asks for some paratas, in the same way, our emotions will ask for particular emotions. You can put that emotion into a story and then serve to a child. And just look at these children are 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. If you give them a story where they almost feel the emotions, they will ask you to serve that dish, meaning serve that story again and again and again. Just as a physical body, having samosa today is not sufficient for the rest of my life, isn't it? After a couple of days, I want that samosa again, I want that paratha again. In the same way, the emotional part asks for that emotion because it's food. And therefore, you tell a story to that child of 5, 6 years. Next day, when the child is about to go to sleep, it will ask, Mama, tell me that story. Well, you can tell it 3, 4 times, you will get bored, but not the child, because the child, for the child, it's emotional food. It is something that nourishes the child. It wants to feel that emotion. You tell the story of how Bhim used to take care of all his bhaias whenever the entire family goes into the forest for a long walk. What happened? Well, Bhim is so strong, and other brothers of him are not so strong. Whenever they walk, whenever, for example, Nakul and Sahadev, the other two brothers, complain that, oh, Dadora, it's paining here, Bhim will lift them up, put them on his shoulders, and he will keep walking. What a beautiful story. If you tell that to children, they get the essence of the love among the siblings, and they feel it. And once they have felt it, beautiful thing with children, they have to express it. You don't have to say, no, Baba, practice truthfulness, practice honesty. I have told you that story, so you practice. No need. If you tell the story of him taking care of his brothers, as soon as the story is over, he will jump out. Of course, he might be over exuberant and enthusiastic in taking care of everything that his siblings or other people need. But here is the most beautiful thing. Also, for example, if you tell the story of Karna, how generous he was, as soon as the story is over, he is going to jump out and then he is going to start distributing things to everybody around. So you have to be careful that he doesn't overdo it because you have your own limitations. Or tell the child the story of how brave Arjuna was, how brilliant he was in terms of protecting his family from the enemies. You stop the story, the child is going to jump out. What will he do? Well, he is going to make a bow, he's going to get arrow, and then he is going to shoot at everybody else and say, I'm Arjuna protecting the family. That is how easy it is to help the child to develop the positive emotion. And this is the second dabba. Somewhere as a child reaches 10, 12, 14 years, it happens in that as a third stage, the child will start asking questions with an idea of following the logic with which you arrive at the answer. This doesn't happen when the child is 4 or 5 years because mostly they are driven by their emotions. I want this, I like it, and therefore I want. But when 10, 12 years, the child will ask question with the idea of understanding. And then he will follow the logic because the third box, the box of logic, begins to open. That is a time for all of us to make use of logic in order to answer the question. 3, 4 year old, you cannot give a lecture on how you have to build your life, what is good for you, what is not bad for you, because it's going to go right over the child. But when the child grows up a little more, when the box of logic opens up, well, then we can make use of what opens, help that mental part, the head space, the capacities of the head space to develop. And this, all these three sequentially starting things, you cannot stop one thing to start the next thing. Once you have started one thing, when the physical education started, it continues throughout the life. Once the emotional education starts, the vital education, it has to start, continue through the life. In the same way, once the mental education starts, the thinking, conscious thinking process starts, it has to continue to be developed throughout the life. But now we come to the most important question. All this is for what? We develop our body, we develop our emotions, we develop our mind, or what? So that we can satisfy our every thought, so that we can satisfy our every emotions, so that we can satisfy every temptation that comes to the body. Is that why we are entering into this type of an education? No. All these three parts have to be developed in order to achieve what all of us have come to achieve in this life. And there, everybody's aim, what one is meant to be in this life, is very, very unique. If at all, one thing which I can confidently say is unique is that the universe doesn't need two people to achieve the same thing in the same way, because that will be duplicating. Why is the universe interested in duplicating? It wants to be, it has so many, infinite variety of things it wants to achieve in a unique combination. And that combination is unique for every one of us. I may be having a same, for example, artistic capacity as another artist, but the way, the things for which I use that art is for my own purpose, what I want to achieve in my life. And that has to be a strong point. The children will have to be helped to understand that they are developing this in order to achieve something which they are born to achieve. And where is that available? What am I meant to be? Just imagine if a child asks you, Mama, what am I supposed to be when I grow up? Well, you can't say, well, your dad is a well known advocate. Now you are also, why don't you try to be an advocate? No. That information, that dimensional awareness is available only within that child. And we will have to make this physical growth, emotional growth, and mental growth happen aligned with the life's purpose, which is embedded in that fourth dimension. Now, a question might come to you. Well, this seems to be very, spiritual, and maybe it is something which is magical. And has anybody spoken about it? Isn't it an area where we have to tread cautiously? Because the moment you say spirituality, just imagine, first of all, there is the confusion between what is spiritual and religion, and it can enter into our life. And the moment we start talking about this fourth dimension, we might be entering into a very, very tricky area, because if we identify this fourth dimension with any one religion, then that is the end of the truth that is within us. We will be putting the child in touch with something which is an incomplete, partial, or even distorted truth. I want to emphasize because in my past years of working, I've got in touch with so many schools, and every one of them is afraid to even talk about the fourth dimension, to discuss about the ways and means in which we can get into, because they think that it is something which is religious, something which can be identified with one religion, with the Hindu religion, Christian or Muslim religion. But this is where the time has now come to go beyond the barriers of religion, because we are not talking about here about any god or any one particular god. We are not talking about Hindu god, Christian god, or an Islamic god. We are talking about a dimension which is inside every one of us. And several of us would have been in touch with it also, and it has got nothing to do with religion, but it has got everything to do with how I shape up and define my life. And therefore, why should there be any hesitation? Because this dimension, this fourth part in us, it doesn't ask anybody to be mold their life in a Hindu way or a Christian way. What it does is it is ready to impart us a wisdom which is not a result of data from outside, but it is something which comes from deep within. And therefore, it is a deep wisdom. It also is something that is going to give us the strength and the power that we need, the inner strength that we need to go through the tough times in our life. And it is also a part in us which is a source of love that we want to share and express with our fellow beings. And this, what does it have to do with religion? And if this is what we are trying to attempt at, our attempt at an integral education. Why do we call it as an integral education? What are we integrating with? Well, we are integrating the three different boxes: our physical, our vital, our emotional, and mental, to integrate with that fourth dimension, so that the fourth dimension becomes a source of infinite wisdom that can express through our mind. So much so that every moment our thoughts are so creative, so dynamic, that it can find solutions for any problem. It can make the life around oneself so beautiful. We are talking about a dimension which can express itself through our emotions, so that we learn to express an unconditional love for everybody around us. And when we can express that, the happiness is a result of that expression of undiluted, almost unconditional love. And we are talking about that dimension which also helps us to express all our energies of the body in a beautiful, harmonious, and rhythmic way. Now, if that is the education that we are talking about, the big question comes. And the question that I'm going to take up, which I have faced in the last session, is that, ye to samajh mein aa gaya. This I understood, but how do we make it happen? Now, remember, one important thing I want to, if we have not understood this insights, all these insights which I have shared with you experientially, if you have not understood it and internalized it, if they are only ideas and concepts, I can see the logic of it. This is one of the best logical way of explaining this type of an education. We cannot go according to our logic. We need to convert it into an everyday experience. If you have not done it, it becomes one more theory, one more logic, and it will be fighting with other 1,000 philosophies of education. You added one more confusion to your existing mind. So if this is to be experienced out of the experiencing of, what is the experience I'm talking about? And whose experience am I talking about? I'm talking about the experience which has to happen in parents and in the teaching community before even they can attempt this type of an education in the school or at home. Now that brings us to a question that last time Dolly has asked. She's from Mumbai. She says, I completely agree with child-centric education. Well, now, without you knowing, I have shifted the meaning of the education. What I have discussed with you is not child-centric anymore. How? Because if you have heard the last part of it, last part, who are the people I'm talking about? I'm talking about the teachers and parents experiencing it. So this education, the first step of education has to be teacher-centered or parent-centered, because they are the people who are going to make this education happen. So as a first step towards implementing this education, we can't implement this education tomorrow from my school. So don't be in too much of a hurry, because the first step is not implementing in education. The first step is implementing in ourselves. Who are we? Parents, teachers. Now, it's an interesting question. I continue Dolly's question. Perhaps we might get some clues to the answer. I completely agree with child-centric education. However, considering the future, doesn't the work hiring and survival culture also need to change? Well, the hiring and survival culture that exists because of an old educational system which is meant to create an intermediary race. How are we supposed to work it? Because if we want it to work, at least two types of it, forget about the entire society, dropping the hiring and survival culture, we can start with the cooperation of just two communities, the parent community and the teaching community. Among them, this is what Dolly puts it forward, the parents need to be educated about the same. Among the teaching community and parent community, she is asking, shouldn't the parents also be educated? Should the parents should be educated first, or the teaching community should be educated first? Which one? Think about it. We already have something going on in the name of education. We already have a group of people identified as educators. So there is already a group and a community which is identifiable happens there. It's easier to reach out to them. And just imagine, try reaching out to the parents, all the administrators of the school. You know how difficult it is to reach out to the parents and then get things done, to communicate one things which is commonly accepted by your parents. Impossible. So even here is the most beautiful thing. Even though parents are the first educators of the child, parents need to open up to this type of an education and facilitate. Remember the physical education part? They have to facilitate from their homes before the child goes into the classes. But who will communicate this to the parents? Well, we need a group of teachers who can explain, communicate, and inspire the parents to take up this first with themselves. If that has to happen, who do we need first? We need a group of teachers who are practitioners of this holistic, this integral education first with themselves. And therefore, you got the answer. Who are the first people whom we have to focus on? We need to have a group of teaching community to get ready to start working on parents, and together they will start imparting this education to children. Now, this fourth dimension seems very spiritual in its nature, in the true word. So Hardik has asked a question in the last interaction. So this getting in touch with the fourth dimension, if that can be called as the spiritual part of the education, are we supposed to provide spiritual education, or the child will learn this on his own. This is
This
an
was
important.
a question in the Facebook group. So we are sharing everything on Facebook Live also. So somebody asked.
Okay, you have voiced that question, right?
Yes.
All right. So this question has been voiced, and then I will take it up. It came through, Hardik. That's another common spiritual things. Where are they supposed to be imparted? Well, they have to be imparted in spiritual places, no? What is school meant for? That is meant for education. Spiritual things, we go to temple or go to satsang or go to ashrams. That is where spiritual things will have to be imparted. Now, even this is one discussion. Right now, we have cleared that this part is within every one of us. Whether you call somebody a spiritual or the most complete non-spiritual person is also carrying this fourth part within in equal measure. So you don't have to worry whether he recognizes it or not. That is his problem. But the fact is, we carry it. Second one, this being very inner thing, अंतर की चीज, So it has to come by itself. You can't force, because humanity has already tried to force spirituality. I know where this question comes from because it's a very deep, probably a question which has come as a result of the painful things happening in the name of the religious struggle. Each religion forcing people to accept one belief, one God, and the God inside, and that is where this question comes. So, will it come by itself? We're not supposed to. So, if we have to keep religion out of our life, a religion which insists on certain external lifestyle but not on realization, this is what we call religion. So, don't misunderstand me. By religion, the general, the way in which religion is practiced is based on belief. You accept it, but if it doesn't insist and if it doesn't take you to the realization of whatever it professes, then one has to be very careful. Because when we realize whether somebody from Christian religion or Muslim religion or Hindu religion, one who has realized the truth can easily recognize the nature of the truth. And it is one. There's only one thing to be realized. And religions break it up, divide us. And will it happen by itself? Because the moment we talk about inner dimension, there's a possibility of religion entering into our school premises. And if we have to break these barriers of religion, we have to have an education which doesn't talk about religiously things, but talk about experiencing what we have covered so far. And therefore, it is this type of a non-religious education or a truly spiritual education is what we are talking about. Then the question comes, will it not happen by itself? Well, look around yourself at all the children. Is it happening in the children by itself? No, it's not going to happen by itself. Remember that the children will not gain this contact with the inner dimension by themselves, left to themselves, because they are in an environment which doesn't promote. And therefore, can we go to the other exam? We can nicely package our education into glittering spirituality studded all over and impart this education. That also is wrong. So we cannot put spirituality into child and we cannot leave the child to himself for this type of education. Then what are we supposed to do? Remember, it's almost like lighting a candle. Once through a candle which is already burning. And what do I mean by that? By a parent or a teacher who is already having that fire in the fourth part, in the fourth dimension, alive and burning. Such a lighted candle can actually light other candles. Is it not imparting spirituality? No. When the candle burns, the candle doesn't burn on borrowed flame, because the flame of the candle is going to come from the candle itself. And that is how the true spirituality, we can be catalysts, we can be facilitators, but we cannot give my flame to another flame and then say, Bacha, then you just get yourself ablaze with it. No, spirituality doesn't work because what burns has to come from the candle itself. But you can facilitate the process. And therefore, in integral education, we don't use the word teachers, but we use the word facilitator. Now, the first step, I have already told you in the first step who should be focused on. Definitely the teaching community. And also, we cannot have step one followed by step two side by side. We will have to prepare the parents community to open up to the need of the hour, telling them simply and directly that 90% of what we do in the name of education is going to be relevant. But we are going to achieve the same results, probably better results, by substituting it with 90% content which is more relevant. Therefore, we end up having a relevant education which will also achieve whatever conventional education achieves. In this education, you get only something more, not that you will be missing something which the conventional education gives you. And this is the education that we talk of. And here we will make a pause because this is being an initial session. If I have to take these sessions further, it can only be done experientially. Otherwise, you might have a tendency to make it into a theory and then think that I can start this integral education Purna Siksha in my home and also in my school. Try that. Of course, if you sincerely try, gradually it can happen. But be careful with that because we have to enter into an experiential phase. And for that, if you are really into practicalities in my life, when I say my life, I am either a parent or a teacher or even anybody else for that matter. In my life, how do I make integral education happen? Because that is the question which will lead us to the question, how do I make it happen in my home or in my school? Let's not put the cart before the horse. If you are interested, probably we can take up because we might need perhaps one session if the same people are coming again where we can pick up plenty of questions and answers because all questions that are coming from you are very important to me. And I would like to answer because then at least the mental barriers will go. Is this a religious education? Now, that can come up. We can solve it by further discussions and dialogue. Or will it happen? How practical is it? And all the other things. If there are really burning questions, perhaps we can have one more concluding interaction. Just don't hesitate to throw questions because those questions can be just a mental barrier. Whereas the integral education, the education where everything finds a place in it, can be much simpler. And we do not yet know the simplicity, the directness, and the effectiveness of this type of education. And in order to just thaw those hard formed questions, we might think of having one more interaction, throw questions at. So, for that to happen, I don't know how to take it forward. So, perhaps we will close our session here. It's already, we have overshot by 8 minutes, but I didn't want to hurry up because then it becomes an overload of information. I made everybody come to a point where we can start asking the question, how do I practice integral education in my life? If that is a question or any other questions, perhaps we can take it up in one more session. And if you want to send any questions beforehand, don't hesitate to type it and send it because we can save the transcript, or you can send it to the email which you have received the information about the session. So we'll pause here, and before I hand it over to Hardik, these are the things we are listening it for the first time. Allow these ideas to seep into you, and once it has gone into you, you'll find that it makes much more sense. And you will say, such a simple thing, how did I miss it? It makes so much sense. It relates to my everyday experience with my child and with everybody else. How did I miss it? If that is the response that you have, then I know that we are traveling in the right direction. It's over to Hardik.
Thank you very much, Shivda. The questions are coming in both on Facebook as well as here. Um, so I'm sure there's a lot that people need to percolate and ponder on. I will send you the questions through mail so that we can decide. And if they can be answered directly, so I can just send whatever answers you type to everyone. And if there are too many, then we can definitely have one more session.
Yes. And do not hesitate to ask questions because we are in a stage where let's get done with questions and get into the action mode. I'm here, I want to work on myself, and that is the starting point. If you are ready, but every year we usually hold an integral education workshop in Pondicherry. It happens in the month of May. Unfortunately, we couldn't happen. But
Hello,
it cannot only happen here.
may I audible, Mr. Hardik Kakkad, sir?
One second, Gajanan ji, I'll just conclude what I'm saying. There are several
Okay,
people.
sir.
There are several people who are already entered the process of practicing integral education, and they are also equally sources from where we can get in touch with, we can clarify, and we can interact physically with them. And one of them, couple of people who are already part of this is Hardik and Neeta Kakkad. And there are a few people in Mumbai. We already have one person with me, Jasmine. We are a team who usually interact with the teachers, helping them to experientially grasp what integral education is about. And there are several other people. Perhaps this series of sessions, if they have to culminate in action, and if it is necessary, we can even think of forming a group and probably a Google group. And from there, we can guide you to those facilities nearby your place where you can get in touch with. Because in this Corona times, I don't think anybody will be traveling for the next 3-4 months. Therefore, you need sources who are closer to you. And as and when the school opens, when the social interaction begins, that time, if we do the groundwork, we can be ready to enter into the next phase of experientially grasping what integral education is about. Now, Gajananji, go ahead with it.
Yeah. Excuse me, please.
Not at all.
May I audible to you all?
Yes, you are audible. And one information to everybody, if anybody is in a rush to finish or prepare your lunch, please go ahead with it. And
I take 1 minute, just 1 minute. A very hearty good morning and afternoon to the genius and dynamic and most honorable and respected personality Shiva Kumar sir, along with Mr. Hardik Kakkad sir. May I know, Mr. Hardik Kakkad sir is the production of Jnanmata High School Convent, Amaravati?
For
Yes.
2 years, yes.
Hello.
Yes, for a few years I was in Myanmar, yes.
Jnanmata High School English Convent, Amaravati district in Maharashtra state in India. I am an ex-teacher of Jnanmata High School English Convent.
Oh,
As I have observed your name as Hardik Kakkad, I have taught you when you had been in grade 5th in Jnanmata High School Convent. Right Reverend George Joseph had been the principal of Jnanmata High School English Convent. And this is the esteemed and renowned institution in India. As I feel proud to be of my school, and I feel proud and I salute you, an honorable and respected Mr. Hardik Kakkad sir.
Gajananji, request if you could just drop in your email or mobile phone in the chat box. Hardik will get in touch with you.
Yeah, sure.
And we will just check up with other people. If something that is relevant to the entire group comes in the form of questions, we will take it up. But please share your mobile phone so that Hardik will get in touch with you.
Yeah.
Anybody else who has a burning question? And only if we have time and a burning question, we will proceed. But everybody else, if you are in hurry for something, please proceed with it.
Shiva Kumar sir, respected Shiva Kumar sir.
Yes, Gajananji.
My aim and objective in the as I am the school administrator of Maharshi Public School CBSE Amravati, my aim and objective is to make a pupil sibling ward as a human being, like a boy as a man and a girl as a woman, so that they can stand on their own feet any platform in the universal globe. As far as the CBSE experiential learning is concerned, yeah. So a boy is called as Padkar Kumar, that is the Master Padkar Kumar, and a girl is called as Miss Karkar Kumari. And we have to build, as a teacher is a nation builder. Nowadays, actually, government has provided a remark to the teacher. A teacher is nothing but a nation builder personality who build everybody in the worldwide globe. Today's president, prime minister, everybody is produced by teacher. Am I
Gajananji,
right?
may I ask a question that what type of
Yeah.
educational content do you follow in the school? Is it some particular syllabus, CBSE or ICSE or state board or any other?
I follow actually I had been in state board for 30 years of journey,
All right.
and now I have switched over to CBSE board pattern school. Second world, my second journey started, and I'm
It's
trying
interesting.
to, yeah, trying to switch over to ICSE pattern school board too,
All right.
because I have surrender and sacrifice my complete life in the holy profession, that is the education system, teaching profession of education system.
This is
Really,
absolutely
it is.
good because just a quick
Um,
sharing. The
yeah,
aspiration is in the right place, but as
yeah,
in the session we saw, this
yeah,
changing from one syllabus to another syllabus is maybe a small change, but if you look at it fundamentally, what we are teaching, by and
yeah,
large, if you have come for the last session, lot
yeah,
of things which are not yet relevant. So we are looking at a revolutionary change, and therefore,
exactly.
rather than trying to make the existing syllabus more and more accessible and interesting to children, we are quietly starting another movement. Of course, these type of little improvements will have to keep on happening, but they are not going to give us a final solution, because the final solution has to be quietly brought in. In that context, and apart from you, there are other people also who are asking the question. So we will have to get into a program, an experiential one, where perhaps if we can select a few teachers from any of the school that want to implement this type of a revolutionary education, or the parents who want to make it happen, we can somehow make them into a group and then start thinking of a program where we can actually start this practical change to happen. And that should be our aim, because already somebody has asked the question that we need to take it to the next level and invite parents and facilitators for the same. But it has to be done, and it has already started happening. The school, the NIVM, which I am in touch with, we are putting our entire resources in making this truly child-centered and teacher-centered education. And there are other schools are also opening up. And therefore, if you would like to know how to take this forward, send an email to Hardik, or if he will be sharing my email also, you can shoot an email to me, and I'm just typing out my email, and if we can take it to the next level, we'll see how to take it to the next level, because this has to culminate in some practical steps.
Am I right? Mr. Shivakumar sir is from Singapore right now.
Well, I am a little closer than that. I'm from Pondicherry, where Sri Aurobindo Ashram is located.
Pondicherry.
Where
And Mr. Hardik
Father and Sri
Kakkad sir,
Aurobindo,
Mr. Hardik Kakkad sir is
let me
from
complete,
Mumbai.
let
Yeah,
me
yeah.
complete my sentence. This is the place from where the integral education insights were for the first time attempted, and therefore which I am sharing. Hardik is looking after a school in Amravati, and it's called NIVM the school, where
Okay, okay. Yeah. Got it.
a holistic education is being implemented gradually. So that is the background of Hardik. He is the director of the school.
even from Amravati camp area, Amravati camp, Amravati. Exactly. I got it now. Yeah, true.
All right.
Thank you very much. God bless you and stay blessed always, evergreen in the grace of our God Almighty. And may God bless you and your family too, Mr. Shivakumar sir, for your selfless, helpful, and cooperative service to the listener, learner, and educator. Really, thank you so much. God bless you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you. And we still continue to need your support in bringing out this education. A quick look at any of the questions that we might have missed. Could you share how could we practically work on all the dimensions through integral education? Well, the integral education, working on oneself has to be aligned with oneself, and it is a little specific. There is a common element too. And if you work on the first step, the second step opens up. And therefore, this has to be done through contact programs. And we will see if you just send me an email. The moment the next program happens, I will probably include you or put you in touch with people who can help you to take it to the next step. So that question was from Dolly. How can I practice? So Niranjana has asked, how can I practice this integral education in day-to-day life? Well, you will have to get in touch with the two books which I suggested last time. If you can go through it, it will give you enough tips to begin with. And then if you can be in touch with people who are practitioners of integral education, none of us here are actually reached a stage of perfection which we are all journeying together, but we can share a few more tips based on our experience too. So getting in touch with and participating in programs where experiential sharing of integral education happens is an excellent way, Niranjana. So Sri Aurobindo Society is into several programs, and there are other people in our network too who are into it. Then Harvinder Kaur has asked, how can we do practically is very crucial. Kindly share. Again, well, a few tips I can share if we have another session, but all to begin with. Then Jayashree has asked, I would like to ask about students are getting bored during history lectures, though we make it interesting. Well, if you give a food to somebody who is not in need of it, of course, he is going to munch it and throw it away. It's not going to be digested. So you will have to ask yourself, is there anything in the history lectures which is the need of the students? And if it is a need, well, they will show interest. If it is not something that meets their need, it will definitely be boring. What will interest the children is what they are ready for and where their interests lie. So nothing wrong with history. The way in which history lectures are given, they are the problem. Jasmine has said we need to take this to the next level and invite parents and facilitators. So those who would like to come and be part of a group, if we can create a group of aspiring practitioners of integral education, with Hardik's help, we can create a team. And especially you are in Amravati and anywhere in Maharashtra, and if we can create this group, we can start planning for the next actual coming together, because that is where the real impact of integral education can be felt. We can plan for it. So if you are interested, please let Hardik know. And we have in Maharashtra from Mumbai, Jasmine is also there, part of our team. And we will get together, put our heads, and come up with a program where we can have something beautiful in Maharashtra taking place. If the schools in Maharashtra wake up first, and if the entire state wakes up, we can have a revolution starting from Maharashtra, spreading to the entire country, and perhaps even outside too. So I'm putting my hope in people from Maharashtra. Doesn't mean that people from other places have to be left behind. You too. Aruna has asked, how can we train the teachers of integral education? Again, get in touch with the people who are already doing it. And anything else? Hardik Akkad has posted the two important source books which will help you to gain insights into integral education. I've been doing this work for 20 years. Even now, when I pick up this book and any page is randomly, if I open it, I get insights from that page. That is how invaluable these books are. And Jayashree says, really thankful. Really, whatever you shared is worthwhile. Please share further sessions. I think we conclude, and if it is possible, we will think of one more session where we share a few tips on how do I do it with myself, which is the foundation for all that we have discovered. If we get the first step right, the second step is easy and within reach. And if we take the second step, third and fourth become within reach. And before long, we will be journeying and cruising at a nice speed. So with that, big thank you for every one of us. A change is waiting to happen. And all we need is your collaboration. Are you willing to collaborate? Is the question which is actually asked by the mother. Are you ready for this collaboration? With that question, I hand it over to Hardik to conclude the session. Thank you so much for being part of this exploration of integral education.
Thank you very much, Shivda. So yes, we have been recording this session, and I have also been putting it up on Facebook. So if anyone would like to go through it again, because I know this is something you can't just get through in one day. So if you would like to see it again, process it again, so it's on Facebook already, and I will also be uploading it on YouTube. And should I be sending your email ID in the mail to whoever has registered?
Yes, sure.
So I'll do that also. So thank you very much. Yeah, so I'll just conclude it here. So see you.
Namaste to everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.